self-disruption is nothing new. It's happened ever since the beginning of business, and innovation and change always occurs. The only constant in life is change. Self-disruption is nothing new. We all need to have, a friend of mine likes to say, we need to have a foot in today and a foot in tomorrow, and really be thinking about how can we disrupt ourselves before somebody else disrupts us. And I think we look at it, when you have multi-generations in the workforce, we look at it within two angles. The first angle is engagement, and the second is enablement. So the crazy thing is that even though we have 4 generations in the workforce today, we're all basically engaged by the same thing, and that's 2 things, purpose and leadership. So if we share the same purpose and we believe in the company, doesn't matter if we're 70 years old or 27 years old, we're all inspired and we are engaged around that common purpose. Not just in China, but around the world. And I think really it's about looking at the leadership qualities that are required to be successful, and then looking at the organization and saying, do we have the people who embody those qualities? And those qualities are changing year after year, and probably nowhere as fast changing as they are in China. Hi, I'm Mike Distefano, President of Korn Ferry for Asia Pacific. Welcome to the HR Festival. On behalf of all the 2,100 men and women that work for Korn Ferry Asia Pacific, we believe that people are people, and there's no better time for the people of Asia Pacific than right now. So I've always been a B2B marketing guy. And I love business to business, I love growth, I love innovation, and I love deals. So in 2001, a very tenacious headhunter named Richard Ferry had reached out to me. And he also was in the B2B business. And he asked me a question. He said, Mike, do you know how many B2B companies or brands really impact us as professionals? And he said, you know, if we buy a telephone, it helps our employees to communicate, but it doesn't really do anything for the manager. And if we buy accounting services, it helps us to make sure our books are proper, but it doesn't really do anything for the person who purchased the service. He said, but Korn Ferry, we change people's lives. So about 15 years ago, Korn Ferry thought, well, we want to own that category of talent and leadership. I think that despite technology advances and globalization, people are still people. And we have hopes and dreams, and we have fears and doubts. And I believe that in HR management, we're definitely all leveraging AI and big data and things of that nature. But fundamentally, it's still about trying to get people to come together and change self-interest into shared interest. And the impact that leadership can have not only on the organization but on the world is tremendous. And so for us, it's really been to help leaders and their organizations to think through what is the role that the people have and how do we align those people to the strategy. And if we can bring those 2 things together, we can help that organization to succeed. So even though the whole world has changed over the last, 20, 30 years, people are still people. Yeah, I think Plato said that like attracts like. So if you have great people, your ability to attract more great people goes up a lot, and they're in high demand. We know that the supply of top talent today is greatly reduced by the demand for top talent today. And there's tens of millions of open jobs all around the world because people just can't find enough great people with the right skills to fill them. So I believe that we have the opportunity to help organizations to think through talent. Not all talent is created equal, and as a leader or the HR leader, you need to think through how much A-level talent does my company need? How much B-level talent does my company need? How many people from the gig economy should we be attracting to the organization? And then what's my strategy for each of those groups? And the strategy, again, is going to be very different for each one of those. It's funny because in this digital era, we talk a lot about self-disruption, and we will probably talk more about that in a moment. But self-disruption is nothing new. It's happened ever since the beginning of business, and innovation and change always occurs. The only constant in life is change. And I think that when I think of the Kodak company, and Kodak had a wonderful history of being innovative and being self-disruptive. So they were using black and white film. They were the leaders in cameras and film for years and years. Somebody came up with this thing called color film, and the quality wasn't good. It was very grainy and not so exciting. But they knew that that would disrupt the industry, and that if they didn't embrace it and embrace it early on, that they would be surpassed. So they were one of the first ones to embrace color film, and of course, you know, they went on and became wildly successful with it. They were also the first ones to invent the digital camera, but they were afraid of digital, and they thought it was a fad, and they thought it was going to pass. And more importantly, they thought that it would be the downfall for film. And so the leadership, not just one leader, not just one leadership team, but under several CEOs with several different boards, made a decision to try to push digital into a corner and continue to push film on the world. And I think it's because of that lack of self-disruption, and because they took an eye off of innovation and transformation, the company struggled. So I think the lesson to learn for all of us is self-disruption is nothing new. We all need to have, a friend of mine likes to say, we need to have a foot in today and a foot in tomorrow, and really be thinking about how can we disrupt ourselves before somebody else disrupts us. I think that I know that internal successions are always better than external recruitments. In fact, we always say that every executive search is a failed internal succession effort. But you don't always have the right people at the right time on the inside. If you do, again, the research would indicate that those people go on to be more successful more often than when you bring people in from the outside. But again, supply and demand, growth, globalization, special skills and expertise that may be required for a company at that particular moment may require you to go to the outside. So bringing in airborne executives is part of day-to-day life for every organization. That said, again, we would still recommend that each company thinks about succession planning, and not just for the CEO, but for every level of the organization. It's a very global world. And so the likelihood that people are going to move around a little bit is okay, and it's part of the new phenomenon or paradigm of business. And I think we look at it, when you have multi-generations in the workforce, we look at it within two angles. The first angle is engagement, and the second is enablement. So the crazy thing is that even though we have 4 generations in the workforce today, we're all basically engaged by the same thing. And that's 2 things, purpose and leadership. So if we share the same purpose and we believe in the company, doesn't matter if we're 70 years old or 27 years old, we're all inspired and we are engaged around that common purpose. The second thing, leadership. Do we believe that the people who are around us and leading us can take us to fulfill that purpose? On the enablement side, though, it's very different. So baby boomers, they are enabled by authority. So, and having the permission to do the job they believe they have. For Generation X, me, and Generation Y, we are motivated by having the resources to do our job. It's not really about, do I have the authority? Do I have the control? So it's more about being resourceful and having the right tools at my disposal to do the job properly. And for millennials, it's all about their own destination. And it's not that they're not aligned to that purpose and vision of the organization, but it's very much, hey, I'm younger in my career. Will this organization in this particular role help me to ultimately achieve where I'm trying to go? And so they're engaged by the fact and enabled by the fact that the organization is aligned with their own personal vision for themselves. So engagement, very, very similar despite age, but enablement very different in the 4 generations in the workforce. Well, listen, I think that China's had one of the biggest growth rates of any nation in the world for years and years now. I think leadership is changing in China. You know, we've done a recent study where investors into Chinese businesses said that they don't believe that the majority doesn't believe that the leadership has the right qualities to lead in the future. At the same token, the investors are putting more pressure on the chief executives and the leadership teams to produce results faster. And they're not willing to give them more time to produce the results. So I think what's happening is there's just a general compression. There's an enlargement of expectation, not just in China, but around the world. And I think really it's about looking at the leadership qualities that are required to be successful, and then looking at the organization and saying, do we have the people who embody those qualities? And those qualities are changing year after year, and probably nowhere as fast changing as they are in China. Yeah, sure. Again, we did a recent study on self-disruptive leaders, and it's based on these 5 different criteria. The first A is for anticipate, the D is for drive, the second A is for accelerate, the P is for partner, and the T is for trust. So what we find in China is that the executives and the leaders today in China really do quite well in about 3.5 of the 5 different attributes. So I do think that the Chinese executives, the ones that they do extremely well on, number 1, accelerate. Health infrastructure is being placed into the country, 1 road, 1 belt. I mean, it's just incredible. So accelerate, incredible. Trust is also quite high, and drive is very strong. I mean, again, nobody works longer and harder. If I come in here to our building on a Saturday or Sunday, the conference rooms are full, people are at their desk, I gotta shoo them out of here to go do something with their friends and family just so we don't burn them out. But I don't think it's because we're putting the pressure on them. I think it's because they know what's possible and they're very committed to the purpose. So I do think that the Chinese entrepreneurs and the Chinese theory of leadership is quite strong. So in terms of, let me take that into the 2 parts. So in terms of how to make Chinese leaders better, that would be the A and the other A and the P in adapt. So the P first, so partner. I think that Chinese organizations have had a long, successful history of running their business. And in today's kind of global and networked economy, there's much more reliance on partnership. Not just in China, but anywhere. It's hard even for CEOs to sort of let go some of that control and to really look at outside providers and partners to help them to fulfill the mission of their organization. Where a business owner or a group of business leaders would have a strategy, they would execute their strategy, and you've got to develop the ecosystem and the network and the partnerships so that people, sometimes even competitive people, have to come together toward the same goal. The second one is anticipate, and that's the bigger one that China needs to focus on, because I think China does a remarkable job of growing individual industries, but now it has the opportunity to sort of lead the world in innovation and transformation. So it's not just a place where things are made anymore or things are replicated anymore. It very much is it's where new ideas are born. You've got to be thinking about, how am I going to be great tomorrow? And then again, that requires a whole different set of skills and mindset and leadership courage. Yeah, again, it's a complicated world, and the pressures for growth are intense. The Boy Scouts have a saying that those that fail to plan, plan to fail. So I think firstly is that every organization needs to have a plan. You need to continue to perform your business, but you also have to have an eye toward the future and transform your business at the same time. So how do we perform and transform? So it's all about how do we continue to do the core business and continue to grow and sustain in the moment around that. Yeah, definitely the war for talent is alive and well. I think that organizations, again, need to have a plan. I think that you have to realize that not everybody is going to stay for a lifetime of employment at your organization. We know from our research that things like salary and benefits are actually going down in terms of the most desired qualities. Things that are rising are things like purpose and vision, as well as flexible working conditions. So again, I think when we recognize that there's not going to be enough great talent in the world, I want to make sure that I'm building a brand and that those people are familiar with my company. So having an employee value proposition is great for the colleagues that work at your organization, but how are you also building that employer brand on the outside? So not only are you attracting great full-time talent on the inside, but you're building that ecosystem so you can partner and plug those two things together. I think every organization is different, and the culture really drives the morale. And they're pretty congruent. Morale drives. I do think there are some titles and some functions that aren't going away. One is experience. So we hear about the other CEO, the Chief Experience Officer. How do consumers and customers deal with your products, and what is that interface? I think interface and client experience is paramount for any company. So having somebody who's completely focused on it makes a lot of sense to me. The second one is the digital. So I think that companies and in the world in general have sort of this misnomer around digital. We all think that digital will save the planet and technology drives everything. And don't get me wrong, it's incredibly important and the impact is insurmountable. But I think that digital today is kind of synonymous for innovation and evolution and such. It's just normal business transformation, that's what I think. That said, the Chief Digital Officer and having a group that's dedicated to that and thinking through how new technologies, disruptive and platform and ecosystem and currency and everything else are going to impact the business is important. And I think that the digital teams and the innovation labs that we've seen pop up over the last 10 to 15 years have now become kind of a staple in global business community. Yeah, sure. Look, I think that technology is impacting every aspect of our lives. We have a customer in Thailand. They make chips for boxes of cereal so that the chip in the box knows when you're running out of cereal so that it tells the Internet of Things to tell Amazon to deliver you another box of cereal. So who would have ever imagined that when they're sitting there eating their Captain Crunch? I think that AI and big data have had a positive impact on the HR community. I look at what we're doing with science and intellectual property, and it helps you to make better people decisions. I think also that technology enables one-to-many personalization. So we've seen Global 2000 companies change their CEO hire decision based on some of the results of the assessments and the simulations that we've put the candidates through. And after all the science and data and IP, they've actually made a change and made a separate decision. And in one instance that I'm thinking of right now, that secondary candidate went on and did amazing things who would have been overlooked if it was just the interviews people to people and they didn't use the technology. So yeah, things will change, but that's why we need to adapt and be self-disruptive and keep moving forward. You know, this is China's time. 5,000 years ago, you the Great basically formed civilization here in China for the world. And due to the demographics, due to the investment, due to the infrastructure, due to the education, due to the drive and the acceleration that the Chinese economy has, I think the future is very bright.